Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to tackle one of life's great certainties, and for many, one of its greatest complexities, the Canadian tax system. We're going to dive into a really fascinating academic paper that uses a mountain of real-world data to give us a clear picture of how it all works, who pays what, and, as we're going to see, why getting the numbers right is so incredibly important.
You know that famous quote from Benjamin Franklin? Well, it's the perfect starting point for the research we're looking at today. Because while taxes are definitely certain, understanding them, that's another story entirely. The paper we're exploring really aims to bring some much-needed clarity to this incredibly complex system.
So here's the game plan. We'll start with the basics, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Then, we're going to see how Canada's system stacks up against the US, which, trust me, reveals some surprising differences. After that, we'll track how things have changed over time, before getting to the real heart of the matter, the critical challenge of building tax models that actually work.
All right, let's get right into it. Before we can start talking about the big stuff like inequality and policy, we need to agree on what we're talking about. When we say how much tax someone pays, what are we actually measuring? Well, it all comes down to one key concept.
This right here is the number that truly matters. We hear a lot about marginal tax rates. That's the tax on your next dollar earned, but that's not the whole story. The effective tax rate is the bottom line. It's the real percentage of a household's total income that goes to taxes after everything's said and done. This is the number that shows the true impact of the system, and it's the central focus of our analysis today.
Okay, this is where it gets really fun. How does Canada's system look when you put it side by side with the United States? The researchers did a deep dive using data from the year 2000, and what they found reveals some fundamental, almost philosophical differences in how our two countries think about taxes.
At first glance, they look pretty similar, right? Both systems are progressive, which just means that as you earn more, you face higher tax rates. But there is one critical difference that changes everything: the tax unit. See, in Canada, we tax the individual. In the US, they tax the household. It might sound like a small detail, but believe me, it has massive consequences.
And this illustrates that point perfectly. Think about it. In Canada, a household where two partners each earn $50,000 pays less total tax than a household where one partner earns $100,000 and the other earns nothing, even though the total household income is exactly the same. Why? It's because our progressive rates apply to each person separately. The research found this can create a difference in tax rates of up to 8 percentage points. That is a huge deal.
So how does this all translate to inequality? Well, to measure that, economists use a really powerful tool called the Gini coefficient. It's pretty simple. It's a scale from 0 to 1. 0 means perfect equality. Everyone earns the exact same amount. 1 means perfect inequality. One person has all the money. So back in 2000, Canada's Gini for household income was 0.49.
Now look at the US for that same year, 0.59. A 0.1 difference on the Gini scale might not sound like a lot, but in economics, that's a massive gap. It tells us, flat out, that even before taxes, income was way more concentrated at the top in the United States than it was in Canada.
And you can see this concentration even more clearly when you zoom right in on the very top. In 2000, the top 1% of households in Canada took home about 11.3% of the nation's total income. But in the US, that same group earned a staggering 20.9%, almost double the share.
And that huge difference in who earns the money translates directly into who funds the government. In Canada, that top 1% contributed about 18.5% of the federal tax bill. In the US, because their share of the income pie was so much bigger, that same group paid almost 36% of the total federal tax. It's a massive difference, and it's almost entirely driven by that gap in top-end income.
But of course, a tax system isn't a snapshot in time. It's always moving, always evolving. So the researchers also tracked how things in Canada changed over a 16-year period. And what they found, well, it challenges some very common ideas about income inequality.
Okay, so let's set the scene back in the year 2000 one more time. The data shows the top 1% of households in Canada earned 11.6% of all pre-tax income. Now, lock that number in your brain for a second, because by 2016, something pretty unexpected happened. That share had actually fallen to 9.8%. Now, this is a really important finding. Contrary to a lot of the public discussion we hear, this data shows that over this specific 16-year period, income in Canada actually became a bit less concentrated at the very top.
Now, let's flip the script and look at the other end of the income ladder. Over that same period, the role of the government grew substantially. For the bottom 20% of households, the share of their income that came from government transfers jumped from around 39% all the way up to nearly 48%. This really shows you the growing importance of programs like CPP, old age security, and child benefits in supporting lower-income families.
So you can actually see the entire system working in real time to reduce inequality. We start with that pre-tax Gini of 0.49. First, deductions and credits come in and chip a little bit off. Then, provincial and federal taxes take a much bigger bite out of inequality. And finally, government benefits and transfers push it down even further. So we end up with a final Gini of 0.42. Every single stage of the system is playing a role.
So this level of detail is exactly what governments need when they're making policy. But this brings up a huge problem. How can they accurately predict what will happen to the economy if they decide to change a tax rule or adjust a rate? This really is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? To answer it, finance departments and economists rely on these incredibly complex mathematical models. But as this research reveals, the most common models out there have a critical and very expensive flaw.
So here's the thing. It turns out that a lot of these standard models are pretty good at predicting taxes for the average person, but they go completely off the rails when they try to estimate the tax rates for the highest income households. And as we've already seen, these are the very people who contribute a huge share of the entire tax base. If you get them wrong, your whole budget forecast is wrong.
And we are not talking about a small error here. The paper shows one widely used model overpredicted the actual tax rate of the top 1% by a full 10 percentage points. An error of that size throws off revenue projections by billions of dollars and gives policymakers a completely distorted picture of reality.
This glaring problem brings us to the paper's main contribution. Because, it's not enough to just point out a flaw, you have to propose a solution. And that is exactly what these researchers did.
They developed a new mathematical specification, which they named ATAN, because it uses the arctangent function from trigonometry. Now, don't worry, you're not going to be quizzed on this. The key takeaway is that this new model is specifically designed to handle the complexities at the very top of the income scale, and it provides a much, much closer fit to the real-world data where all the other models fail.
And let's be really clear, having a precise model like this isn't just some abstract academic exercise. This has profound real-world consequences. It means more accurate budget predictions. It means we can have a more honest conversation about what a proposed tax change will actually do. Ultimately, it means our entire public debate about fairness and inequality can be built on a foundation of fact, not on flawed estimates.
And that leaves us with one final, crucial thought. This research gives us a much better tool, a more accurate map of our economic reality. But a map doesn't tell you where to go. Even with a perfect model, we, as a society, still have to answer that fundamental question. What kind of system do we actually want to build? What does fair really mean? And that's a question that no model can ever answer for us.